The alarm clock on the bedside table didn't buzz. It clicked, a soft mechanical sound that Thomas Weiler had been trained to hear even in the deepest sleep. 5:45 a.m. Tom didn't groan. He didn't hit snooze. In his world, hitting snooze meant missing the bus, missing breakfast, or missing the fragile window of time. He had to make sure his 7-year-old son, Leo, started the day with a smile. Tom rolled out of bed, his feet hitting the cold laminate floor of the small 2-bedroom apartment in Queens. The rent took 60% of his paycheck, and the rest went to food, Leo's asthma medication, and the internet bill. He pulled on a pair of faded sweatpants and walked to the kitchen. The kitchen was the heart of their tiny world. It smelled of stale coffee and peanut butter. Tom loved it. He started the toaster, cracked 2 eggs into a pan, and listened for the sound of Leo stirring. "Daddy," a sleepy voice called out. Tom's face, usually drawn tight with the stress of unpaid bills, softened instantly. "Up and at him, Space Ranger." Launch sequence starts in T-10 minutes. Leo shuffled into the kitchen, dragging a blanket behind him. He had Tom's unruly brown hair and his mother's wide, questioning eyes that Tom tried not to look at too closely, lest he remember the day she walked out 3 years ago because poverty wasn't an adventure she signed up for. "Did you iron your shirt?" Leo asked, climbing onto the stool. "I did," Tom lied. He had hung it in the bathroom while he showered, hoping the steam would do the job. He worked in the basement archives of Vance Global, a corporate behemoth in Manhattan. Nobody looked at the archivists. They were the ghosts of the building, shuffling paper in the windowless depths. "Good," Leo said seriously, biting into his toast. "You have to look handsome. Maybe the boss will give you a raise." Tom chuckled a dry sound. "The boss doesn't know I exist, Leo. And that's okay. Being invisible keeps us safe." 30 floors above the streets of Manhattan, in a penthouse that cost more than Tom would earn in 10 lifetimes, Elena Vance woke up. There was no alarm. Her internal clock was calibrated to the opening of the London Stock Exchange. She sat up in a bed covered in 1,000 thread-count Egyptian cotton, surrounded by silence. Elena was 34 years old, the CEO of Vance Global, and arguably the most terrified woman in New York City. Not that anyone would know. To the world, she was the ice queen of Wall Street. To her board of directors, she was a legacy hire they were desperate to replace. To her family, she was a bargaining chip. She walked to her floor-to-ceiling window, looking down at the city. She felt nothing. No joy, no excitement. Just the crushing weight of the $40 billion conglomerate her grandfather had built and her father had almost destroyed. Her phone buzzed. A text from her mother. "Don't forget the gala on Friday. Marcus Sterling will be there. Wear something red. Men like red." Elena didn't reply. She drank her black coffee, put on her armor, a $3,000 charcoal suit, and prepared to go to war. The incident happened on a Tuesday. It was a day that started with disaster. The automated filing system on the 40th floor, the executive suite, had crashed. The IT department was overwhelmed, and someone remembered that the guy in the basement knew the old legacy filing codes. Tom was summoned. He felt out of place the moment the elevator doors opened on the 40th floor. The air here was different. It was recycled, yes, but it smelled of expensive leather, fresh orchids, and fear. The carpet was so thick it swallowed the sound of his scuffed dress shoes. Mr. Weiler, an assistant with a headset, looked at him like he was a delivery driver who had lost his way. "Ms. Vance is in a meeting, but she needs these files manually sorted immediately." Tom nodded, keeping his head down. "Yes, ma'am." He was kneeling by a mahogany cabinet, sorting through documents, when the double doors of the boardroom burst open. A group of men in gray suits marched out, looking grim. Following them was Elena Vance. Tom had seen her on magazine covers. In person, she was terrifying. She radiated a cold, sharp energy that made the air feel thin. She was pacing, reading a document, her brow furrowed in frustration. She stopped abruptly in front of Tom. He froze, clutching a file folder like a shield. Elena didn't look at his face. She looked at his neck. "Stand up," she commanded. Her voice was low, smooth, and brooked no argument. Tom scrambled to his feet, dusting off his knees. "Ms. Vance, I was just—" "Your tie," she interrupted. Tom looked down. In his rush to get Leo to school and catch the subway, his tie, a cheap polyester thing he'd bought at a thrift store, was hopelessly crooked. The knot was loose, exposing the top button of his frayed shirt. "It's a mess," she said. It wasn't an insult. It was a statement of fact, delivered with the same clinical detachment she used to fire CFOs. Before Tom could apologize, Elena stepped forward. She invaded his personal space, bringing with her the scent of sandalwood and cold rain. She reached out. Her fingers, cool and manicured, brushed against his neck as she undid the knot. Tom stopped breathing. He was a man who hadn't been touched by a woman in 3 years. Not a hug, not a handshake, certainly not this. He stared at the top of her head. She was focused, her eyes narrowing as she deftly retied the knot. She pulled it tight, firm, authoritative. She smoothed the cheap fabric down his chest. For a second, her hand lingered over his heart. His heart hammered against his ribs like a trapped bird. The physical reaction was immediate and betraying. His breath hitched, coming out in a sharp, ragged gasp. Elena froze. She looked up. For the first time, their eyes met. Hers were gray, intelligent, and startled. His were brown, warm, and terrified. She didn't pull away. She stayed there, her hand on his chest, feeling the frantic rhythm of his heart. She raised a perfectly sculpted eyebrow. "Why are you breathing like that?" she asked softly. The question hung in the silence of the executive suite. It wasn't mocking. It was genuine curiosity. Why did this man, this invisible cog in her machine, react as if she had just electrocuted him? Tom's voice failed him. "I'm sorry, Amos. Vance. I just..." He couldn't say, "Because you smell amazing, and I'm lonely, and no one has touched me gently in 1,000 days. It won't happen again," he choked out. Elena studied him for a second longer, a strange flicker in her eyes. Then the mask slammed back down. She stepped back, the CEO once again. "See that it doesn't," she said coolly. "And fix your collar. You represent Vance Global, even in the basement." She turned and walked into her office, the heavy door clicking shut. Tom stood there, trembling, while 3 assistants stared at him. He didn't know it yet, but the security camera in the corner had recorded the whole thing. By lunchtime, the image was everywhere. Someone in security had taken a screenshot. The angle was misleading. It looked intimate. Elena Vance, the untouchable Ice Queen, standing inches from a tall, broad-shouldered man, her hands on his chest, looking up into his eyes. The caption on the internal chat board read, *, the Ice Queen melts? Who is the mystery man? *. Tom hid in the archives, eating his peanut butter sandwich. He felt sick. He needed this job. If they fired him for fraternizing, he and Leo would be on the street in a month. At 4 p.m., his worst fear materialized. "Mr. Weiler." It was the executive assistant again. "Ms. Vance wants to see you." Now, the ride up the elevator felt like a funeral procession. Tom mentally calculated his savings. $400. Enough for groceries, but not rent. He'd have to beg his landlord for time. He entered the office. It was vast, with a view of the Hudson River that probably cost $1 million. Elena was sitting behind a glass desk that looked like a sheet of ice. "Sit," she said, not looking up from her tablet. Tom sat on the edge of the leather chair. "Ms. Vance, about the photo. I had nothing to do with it. I can resign if..." "Stop." She looked up. She looked tired. "The armor was cracked. I don't care about the photo, Mr. Weiler. In fact, the photo is the only reason you're here." Tom blinked. "I don't understand." Elena stood up and walked to the window. "My family is trying to force a merger with Sterling Industries. To do that, they want me to marry Julian Sterling. He is a shark. If I marry him, I lose control of my company within a year." She turned to face him. "I need a distraction. I need a reason to say, no, that doesn't involve business. The board thinks I'm cold, unlovable, and married to my job. That photo, it made the stock price jump 2% this morning. People like the idea of me having a human connection." Tom's hands gripped the armrests. "What are you saying? I'm offering you a job, Mr. Weiler. A contract position. 6 months. What's the job?" "Be my boyfriend." Tom laughed. He couldn't help it. It was a nervous, hysterical sound. "Ms. Vance, look at me. I buy my clothes by the pound. I take the subway. I have a 7-year-old who thinks spaghetti is a food group. I am not a boyfriend material for someone like you. Exactly, Elena said, her eyes gleaming. You are safe. You are beneath the radar. Julian Sterling is a billionaire. He expects a challenge. He won't see you coming because he won't believe you exist. You are the perfect shield. She slid a contract across the desk. 6 months. You attend galas, family dinners, and public events. You pretend to be in love with me. In return, she pointed to a figure at the bottom of the page. Tom looked. $20,000 per month. The air left his lungs. $20,000. That was everything. Plus, Elena added, full medical benefits for you and your dependents, and a housing stipend, Leo's asthma inhalers, a safer apartment, a winter coat that actually fit. The debt from the divorce lawyers wiped clean. I can't lie to my son, Tom said quietly. You don't have to, Elena countered. Tell him it's a work assignment. Because it is. This is business, Thomas. Strictly business. Tom thought of Leo sleeping in the drafty bedroom. He thought of the final notice on the electricity bill. He picked up the pen. I have conditions. Elena raised an eyebrow. You're negotiating. I need to be home by 8 p.m. on weekdays to read to my son. And weekends are his. If you need me on a Saturday, he comes with me, or I don't go. Elena stared at him. Most men would have asked for a car or a watch. He asked for bedtime stories. Agreed, she said softly. He signed. The transformation was painful. Elena hired a team. A stylist, a posture coach, a barber. He has good bones, the stylist mumbled, pinning a navy suit jacket around Tom's shoulders. Broad shoulders. Good height. But he slouches like he's apologizing for existing. Fix it, Elena said from the corner, watching over the rim of her espresso cup. For 3 days, Tom was poked, prodded, and polished. His unruly hair was trimmed into a sharp, classic style. His stubble was groomed. The cheap polyester was replaced by Italian wool and silk. When he finally looked in the mirror, he didn't recognize himself. The man staring back looked capable. He looked powerful. It's not just the clothes, the posture coach told him. You are a father, Thomas. You protect a life every day. Carry yourself with that pride. You are not a subordinate here. You are the Queen's partner. Act like a king. On Friday night, the limousine arrived at his apartment building in Queens. The neighbors peeked out from behind curtains. Tom walked out, holding Leo's hand. He was dropping Leo off at Mrs. Higgins' apartment next door. Wow, Dad. Leo's eyes were wide. You look like James Bond. Just work, buddy, Tom said, kneeling down. He felt like a fraud. I'll be back in the morning. He climbed into the back of the limo. Elena was there. She was wearing a red dress that looked like liquid fire. It was backless, elegant, and dangerous. She looked at him. Her gaze started at his polished shoes, traveled up the fitted suit, and landed on his face. She didn't say anything for a long moment. You clean up well, Mr. Weiler, she said, her voice slightly huskier than usual. Tom, he corrected. If we're dating, you have to call me Tom. Tom, she tested the word. I'm Elena. I know. No, she said, looking out the window. You know the CEO. Tonight, I need you to know Elena. Because if you look at me with fear in your eyes, the sharks will eat us alive. The gala was held at the Met. It was a swirling ocean of diamonds, champagne, and fake smiles. Tom felt the panic rising in his throat as he stepped onto the red carpet. The flashes of the cameras were blinding. Breathe, Elena whispered, slipping her arm through his. Her skin was warm against his sleeve. Look at me. Ignore them. He looked at her. In the chaos, she was the only steady thing. He took a deep breath. Do it for Leo. He straightened his spine. He placed his hand over hers on his arm. He smiled. Inside, the atmosphere was suffocating. People whispered as they passed. Who is he? Is that the file clerk? No, look at the suit. He must be new money. Then he approached. Julian Sterling was handsome in a predatory way. He was 50, tanned, and oozed entitlement. He walked up to them, holding a glass of scotch. Elena, Julian purred, kissing her cheek. She stiffened. And who is this accessory? This is Thomas, Elena said, her voice steel. My partner. Julian looked Tom up and down. He smirked. Thomas, I don't recognize the name. Which firm are you with? Or are you simply happy to be here? It was a trap. If Tom said he was an archivist, Julian would humiliate him. If he lied, he'd be exposed. Tom looked Julian in the eye. He thought about the posture coach. He thought about the bullies who used to tease Leo. I'm in operations, Tom said smoothly. I specialize in optimizing critical infrastructure. Basically, I make sure the things people take for granted don't collapse. It wasn't a lie. He managed the archives. Without archives, legal compliance failed. Julian laughed, a cruel barking sound. Operations? How quaint. Tell me, Thomas, how does a man in operations afford a suit like that? Or does Elena keep the receipts? The circle of socialites around them went quiet. It was a direct insult. A challenge. Elena opened her mouth to defend him, fury flashing in her eyes, but Tom squeezed her arm gently. I got this. Tom took a step forward. He was taller than Julian. He didn't look angry. He looked amused. You know, Mr. Sterling, Tom said, his voice calm and deep. My son asked me something similar this morning. He asked why I was dressing up. I told him that value isn't determined by the price tag on the jacket, but by the man wearing it. Elena doesn't need a bank account to validate her. She has her own. She needs someone who sees her, not a merger opportunity. That's a currency you seem to be bankrupt in. Silence. Absolute silence. Someone in the back coughed. A woman giggled. Julian's face turned a violent shade of red. He opened his mouth, but found nothing to say. He had been dismissed, politely and brutally, by a nobody. Enjoy the scotch, Julian, Tom said. He turned to Elena. Shall we dance? Elena was staring at him. Her mouth was slightly open. She looked impressed. Yes, she whispered. We shall. On the dance floor, wrapped in her arms, Tom felt the trembling in her hands. You humiliated him, she murmured against his ear. No one has ever spoken to him like that. He was bullying you, Tom said simply. I don't like bullies. Elena pulled back to look at him. The icy facade was gone. Thank you. Part of the job, boss. Elena, she corrected. Tonight, just Elena. Weeks passed. The contract became a routine. But the lines were blurring. One Tuesday evening, a storm hit New York. The subway system flooded. Tom was stranded at the office at 7 p.m. I have to get home, Tom paced the lobby. Mrs. Higgins can't stay past 8. Leo needs his nebulizer before bed. A black town car pulled up. The window rolled down. Get in, Elena said. I can't ask you to drive to Queens. You're not asking. Get in. The drive was silent until they reached the rundown apartment complex. The rain was torrential. I have to run in, Tom said. Thank you for the ride. I'm coming in, Elena said. What? No. It's not a penthouse, Elena. It's a fourth-floor walk-up. I want to meet the reason you negotiated for bedtime stories. Tom couldn't stop her. They walked up the stairs, Elena holding her expensive coat tight against the smell of damp plaster. Inside, the apartment was small, cluttered, but warm. It was filled with books, Lego sets, and glow-in-the-dark stars stuck to the ceiling. Leo was sitting on the floor, building a spaceship. He looked up. Daddy. He ran to Tom. Then he saw Elena. He stopped. Is that the Queen? Elena laughed. It was a genuine, bubbling sound Tom had never heard. Not a queen. I'm Elena. You look like a queen, Leo decided. Do you like space? I don't know much about it, Elena admitted, kneeling down in her $800 heels. That's okay, Leo said. I can teach you. This is the Saturn V. It went to the moon. For the next hour, Tom watched in disbelief as the CEO of Vance Global sat on his frayed rug, learning about rocket propulsion from a 7-year-old. She wasn't checking her phone. She wasn't worrying about stocks. She was listening. When Leo started to wheeze, Tom sprang into action, getting the nebulizer. Elena watched the practiced efficiency of his movements, the gentle way he held the mask to his son's face, the soothing words he whispered. He is a good man, she thought. A genuinely good man. After Leo was asleep, Tom walked her to the door. I'm sorry about the mess, he said. It's not a mess, Elena said softly. It's a home. I live in a museum, Tom. This is real. She looked at him. The distance between them was zero. The air was charged with static electricity. Tom, she whispered. She reached out, fixing his collar, just like the first day. But this time, her hand lingered on his cheek. Tom leaned into her touch. He couldn't help it. He was starving for warmth, and she was afire. Elena, he breathed. She stood on her tiptoes. He lowered his head. Their lips were an inch apart. Tom's phone vibrated. A text from a landlord. The spell broke. Elena pulled back, flushing. I should go, she said quickly. Yeah, Tom rasped. Safe drive. He watched her go, his heart aching. Don't be stupid, he told himself. She's the CO. You're the help. Don't fall for the client. But it was too late. 3 months into the contract, the world crashed. Tom walked into the break room to find his colleagues huddled around a TV. Can you believe it? One whispered. I thought she was dating the operations guy. Guess money talks louder than love. Tom looked at the screen. Breaking news, Vance Global and Sterling Industries announce merger. Elena Vance and Julian Sterling engaged. The headline flashed in bold red letters. Tom felt like he had been punched in the gut. He dropped his coffee mug. It shattered, dark liquid spreading across the floor like oil. Engaged? He ran to the elevator. He bypassed the assistants. He burst into her office. Elena was standing by the window, her back to him. Julian Sterling was sitting on her desk, looking smug. Oh, the boyfriend, Julian sneered. Time to pick up your severance check, sport. The play is over. Tom ignored him. Elena? Is it true? Elena turned around. Her face was pale, her eyes dead. Thomas, you shouldn't be here. Is it true? The board forced a vote, she said, her voice robotic. If we don't merge, they liquidate the company. My grandfather's legacy. I couldn't let it die. So you're marrying him? Tom pointed at Julian. It's a business arrangement, Elena said, pleading with her eyes. Just like ours was. Just like ours was. The words cut deeper than any insult Julian could have thrown. I see, Tom said. His voice was cold. Just business. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the corporate credit card she had given him for expenses. He placed it on the desk. I quit, he said. Tom, wait. Elena took a step forward. No, Tom said. I can pretend to be rich. I can pretend to be confident. But I can't pretend that this, he gestured between them, meant nothing. I thought you were different. But you're just as poor as I am, Elena. You just have more money. He turned and walked out. He went to the basement, packed his box, and left the building. He didn't look back. The next 2 weeks were a blur of misery. Tom found a job at a hardware store. It paid half of what Vance Global paid. The apartment felt colder. Leo asked about Queen Elena every day. She's busy, buddy, Tom would say, his heart breaking. Did she go to space? Leo asked. Yeah, a planet far away. Tom watched the news. The merger was scheduled to be signed on Friday. The wedding of the century was being planned. He saw photos of Elena. She looked beautiful. She also looked like she was dying inside. On Thursday night, Tom sat on his fire escape, looking at the city lights. He held the cheap polyester tie in his hands, the one she had fixed. Why are you breathing like that? Because I loved you, you idiot. He realized then that he had a choice. He could be the invisible man, the victim, the guy who got crushed by the system. Or he could be the man Leo thought he was. The man Elena needed him to be. Friday, 10 a.m. The Vance Global boardroom was packed. Lawyers, bankers, and the press. Julian Sterling sat at the head of the table, a pen in his hand, ready to sign the document that would give him everything. Elena sat opposite him. She held a pen, but her hand was shaking. Sign it, darling, Julian whispered. Don't make a scene. Elena looked at the paper. I hereby transfer majority control. The doors burst open. Security guards shouted, Sir, you can't go in there. Tom Weiler strode into the room. He wasn't wearing the Italian suit. He was wearing his best flannel shirt and a pair of clean jeans. He looked like exactly who he was, a working-class father who had had enough. Thomas. Elena stood up, shock registering on her face. Get him out. Julian roared. No. Elena shouted. Let him speak. Tom walked to the table. He ignored Julian. He looked only at Elena. You told me once that you built your life around control, Tom said, his voice filling the room. That you had to protect the legacy. But what is a legacy if you're miserable, Elena? Tom, please. She whispered, tears forming. My son asked where you went, Tom continued. I told him you went to another planet. But you're not on another planet. You're right here. And you are about to make the biggest mistake of your life. He took a breath. I don't have billions. I have a walk-up in Queens and a mountain of student debt. But I know what real value is. It's waking up and not dreading the day. It's having someone who asks if you're okay and actually cares about the answer. Julian wants your company. I just want you. The room was deadly silent. The reporters were typing furiously. Julian laughed nervously. This is pathetic. Security. Shut up, Julian, Elena snapped. She looked at Tom. She looked at the contract. She looked at the life that had been mapped out for her, cold, rich, and lonely. Then she looked at Tom's flannel shirt. She remembered the warmth of his kitchen. She remembered the way he looked at his son. She remembered how she felt when he held her hand. Elena Vance picked up the contract. She ripped it in half. The deal is off, she announced. You can't do that. Julian screamed. The stock will tank. You'll be ruined. I don't care, Elena said. She walked around the table. She stood in front of Tom. You're late, she said, a tear rolling down her cheek. Traffic was murder, Tom smiled. She grabbed his face and kissed him. It wasn't a polite gala kiss. It was desperate, messy, and real. The room erupted in flashes and shouting, but neither of them noticed. 6 months later, the stock did drop. Then it went back up. People, it turned out, loved a love story. Elena remained CEO, but she made changes. She fired the board members who had pushed for the merger. She promoted from within. She installed a daycare center on the second floor. It was Saturday morning in the penthouse. The smell of peanut butter toast wafted through the air. Leo was in the living room, building a Lego replica of the Vance Global Tower. Tom stood in front of the mirror in the master bedroom. He was struggling with his tie. He was dressed for a charity lunch, a real one this time. I swear these things shrink, he muttered. Elena walked in. She was wearing a simple white dress. She looked happier, softer. She saw him struggling and smiled. She walked over, brushing his hands away. Allow me, she said. She undid the messy knot. Her fingers brushed his neck. She tied it expertly, smoothing the silk down his chest. Her hand rested over his heart. It was beating steady and strong. She looked up at him, her gray eyes full of light. You're not breathing like that anymore, she teased. Tom wrapped his arms around her waist, pulling her close. No, he said, kissing her forehead. I only breathe like that when I'm scared. And I'm not scared anymore. Daddy. Elena. Leo shouted from the other room. The spaceship is ready for launch. Elena laughed. She took Tom's hand. Come on, Mr. Weiler, she said. Mission Control is waiting. They walked out of the room, hand in hand, ready to face the world together.